We want to welcome all of you. My name is Michael Maera, and I work with the East Africa Philanthropy Network. Together with my colleague, Judith, we are going to be your moderators today, and we want to begin by inviting Madam Susan, who will give us the introductory remarks to this webinar. Karibu, Madam.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching us from. My name is Susan Otieno, Executive Director, ActionAid Kenya. Just to start off by letting you know that ActionAid is turning 50 years this year since we started work in Kenya. And through our journey, we've come to appreciate partnerships. We started our work as direct implementation, where we would identify an area, go to the area and simply make the decision that this area needs a school, it needs a toilet, the school needs a toilet, or communities need water. And with that kind of direct implementation, we realized that there were challenges which would come up in terms of ownership, sustainability, and even ensuring that there's replication or community members being able to demand for such services from the duty bearers. With time, we moved our mode of implementation to involve the communities. However, as we kept involving the communities, we simply brought them in to identify. And after identifying the specific intervention, we would again come in and have the project delivered and hand over and walk away. But with time again, as time went by, we again realized that there were pertinent stakeholders that we were leaving behind. One, we were not implementing this through stakeholders, through supporters. We have individual givers. We have institutional organizations that give to ActionAid. We had corporates, we had foundations that gave to ActionAid. And so we felt that to build the ownership, we needed to pull in an approach that brought everyone on board. And that is how we started appreciating partnerships. Of course, as we progressed, I would call it, when we got to 35 years, we now realize that ideally what we are doing is not squarely an NGO or a CSO or a corporate's responsibility, but there is a duty bearer who's supposed to be delivering on this. And so we moved into community involvement. I would call it greater and meaningful involvement of communities, where we would go in together with the partner who is supporting us with the resources. We would sit with the communities, design the program, but in the process, we would also shift their focus on the rights, the duty bearers. Now, if I take water, for instance, the government commits to ensure that there is water in every village, running water actually from a tap. They commit to have schools at a close distance. They commit to have water sources that people would spend very little time to walk towards, and even health centers and hospitals. But then this is not the case in the entire country. So we started then engaging with the communities. First, to design what we call models. We would model with the community to demonstrate involvement, to demonstrate ownership, and also to bring in the element of sustainability. So we started the co-creation conversations. Yes, you need water, but how do you need it? What's range between the villages and the communities? And as they start enjoying the water, we would then go into a rights conversation with them and ask them, who should ideally provide water? Everybody in the community would actually give you the response that it is the government. And the moment they said so, we now realize that they know that the government has a responsibility. And we also started letting the communities know that what we do as non-profit organizations is to seek well-wishers, to seek partners, to seek stakeholders who equally have a responsibility, but ultimate responsibilities with the government. And so we were able to shift the communities to be able to know where to direct the asks, but most importantly, to see how to participate. So as we did the modeling, they learned that they need to participate way before the decision is made. How do they participate in the budgeting? And how do they make sure that they've put the community needs and priorities well packaged, develop their capability to speak for themselves and go and interact with the government? But also, how do they build in accountability? As they're interacting with the government, they're also building in accountability. And that accountability is what we've been able to do, I would say, at age 40. We've been able to work with these communities and now bring in the true understanding of accountability. That if you demand accountability, who partner with us, take them to the community and let the community have a conversation with them, then they've grown that culture of being able to account. So we are here today to have this conversation on partnerships between corporates and non-profit organizations. But what will be very interesting is to see how we are building the joint understanding, how we bring in the joint collaborations and other approaches that bring us into success. Maybe from where you're seated, when you hear corporates, you're thinking profit, but with profit without people can't be appreciated at the end of the day. And that is why, as non-profit organizations, we found it fit to work with corporates. And you will get to learn from the panelists who are here, who are equally engaging in that kind of the model, engaging with the corporates to be able to model to the communities, but ensure that the communities continue holding governments accountable, contributing in the decision-making, building in and participating in leadership, and equally becoming leaders. As we continue, we'll get to hear of some of the examples where we've had women, for instance, who couldn't speak before to express their interest, but because there was funding and they participated in the design, in the co-creation, their capacity was built, and they are now able to face the government. And most importantly, many of them have even gone into politics. If you look through the number of women, these just ended elections, the number has gone up. And we are proud as non-profit organizations, the kind of contribution that we've brought to ensure that we have the communities coming out to take leadership and participate in the decision making. So I welcome you all. And I look forward to an interactive session, and not forgetting that this is just foundation to the upcoming corporate event, which you'll get to learn more about it as we continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Susan. That is quite apt in terms of how you've painted at least the journey of Action Aid over the last 50 years. Mm-hmm. Now, as we walk through this, we have a very able panel here. And I want to take this few minutes to welcome each one of them, to introduce themselves, and tell us a little bit about the organizations that they work with and work for as we set the pace for this discussion today. I want to begin with Henry. Karibu-san.
Thank you very much, and good morning. My name is Henry Kilonzo. I am a senior manager with Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundations, and I head programs in the two foundations. Safaricom Foundation was established in the year 2003, and M-Pesa Foundation was established in the year 2010. Both foundations have one core purpose, which is transforming lives, which is also linked to the purpose of on improving education outcomes, from improving the learning spaces, content, use of technology to improve learning, improving the infrastructure, and then we also in health. And in health, we focus on maternal, newborn, and child health, especially in the high burden counties, because we know there are approximately 15 counties that contribute to 99% of the maternal mortality in this country. We also focus on non-communicable diseases, especially referrals and linkages to facilities, and also diabetes for children. And then we also focus on economic empowerment for young people, Kenya and Africa, of that, and looking at opportunities where we can really bring out the meaningful employment, meaningful income for young people in this country. Cross-cutting in all the three areas is the issue of water. And that's the reason we are here, and also having partnered with ActionAid for the last 12 years, reaching more than 300,000 Kenyans in this country. And then integrated what we call water, livelihood, and environmental conservation, which are critical because we know the impact of climate change, the impact of environmental changes to the livelihoods, to health, and other social well-being outcomes for this country. We value areas that we focus on as both foundations. However, we bring in our core competence, which is technology, as Safaricom, now to partner with now other organizations who have the core competencies around the community engagement, so that we can together work together and create that transformative long-term change to Kenyan communities. Because we know, as Susan has said, definitely profit cannot come before people. People have to come before profit. And as Safaricom, we say, when communities thrive, businesses thrive. And that's the essence of our existence as Safaricom and M-Pesa Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. That captures the essence of what non-profits are all about, that the development of persons and people and communities is our aim as non-profits. Grace, welcome.
Thank you.
KCDF is a big starter and a big trailblazer in this. Please tell us about yourself and KCDF.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you to ActionAid for this invitation. Susan, congratulations on turning 50. As the Kenya Community Development Foundation, I think we are your small sister or small brother. We turned 25 this year. Wow. And so we really, really do appreciate this platform. Speaking about communities, I feel I'm in really good audience. We focus on ensuring that we help communities not only think about their sustainable development, but social justice as well. And so our values align very well with not only with Safaricom, but also with other partners on this panel, and especially with ActionAid. As KCDF, we work in 5 key strategic areas. We focus on livelihoods. We also focus on environmental conservation, education, giving communities voice and agency, as well as growing philanthropy in Kenya. We really look forward to having opportunities to speak more about the work that we do. But as a community foundation, what that simply means is that we are able to support communities at different levels. Kenyan communities were able to support those that are working not only at the national level, right down to the community level, at the county level, through the grants that we support them with, also in terms of capacity building. So as KCDF, being a community foundation, at the center of it, of course, is partnerships. And therefore, this conversation today is very key to us. And again, we really appreciate the platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grace. And now, development in the larger sector has tenets that it relies on. And one of the major tenets is research, sound research that then directs the process of creating and growing communities and growing partnerships. I want to welcome Terry. Tell us about your organization and what you've done. Okay. And Terry will take us through into a research that they carried out that focuses around partnerships between non-profits and the community, the non-profits within the region, but also with corporates, the general partnerships, strategic partnerships that then drive development. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Right. So my name's Terry Githinji. I'm working with an organization called FINGO as a Partnership and Innovations Advisor. Now, FINGO stands for Finnish NGOs. So it's an umbrella organization for all Finnish NGOs registered in Finland, but quite a number of them are working in East Africa, in Kenya, and another like 9 countries in Africa. So what we do is we serve on areas of innovation, technology solutions, and private sector collaboration. And I think just to congratulate ActionAid, first on attaining 50 years. I mean, that's a big feat. I'm sure just looking around in the room, I don't know, our bodies could hide the ears, but, ActionAid could be older than 90% of us in this room. So congratulations. And KCDF, I think, has led the conversation around incorporating communities at the grassroots. And you also really started the conversation around private sector collaboration, philanthropy in Kenya, and you've set the pace for the rest of us to follow. And just not to mention Safaricom Foundation. I mean, Safaricom is the one of the organizations that's leading in the corporate sector. And interestingly, also in the sector on working directly with communities through your various foundations and other CSR, activities. So I'm glad to be on this panel this morning, and just to say thank you for putting this together. I think it's at the right time that we're having this conversation. So as I mentioned, we support member organizations to innovate, to incorporate technology solutions, and to also have or start and initiate and carry forward private sector collaboration. And you may wonder why the 3? Why innovation? Why private sector? Why technology? And I would say private sector collaboration, or working in partnership between institutions, that is the government, NGOs, private sector, academia. We also look at partnership between these organizations and academia. I think it's the next big thing about sustainable development across the globe. Yes, I would actually say it's the next big innovation. And as we are seeing now, the world is interconnected in ways that we could never have imagined. And this has been facilitated by technology. And so that's why we support our member organizations to incorporate technology solutions as well in their innovations and in their work. And why I say this is, as you will see, people, processes, problems are also interlinked. What is affecting private sector, what is affecting communities, what's affecting academia, the problems are so interlinked. Look at what happened with COVID-19. It affected the entire continent. Look at what's happening now with the global economic crisis. It's affecting every other sector. Look at what's happened to boil over and affecting the entire globe. So there's a lot of interconnectedness of problems, and so we cannot ignore any longer the need to create this hybrid model where all institutions work together. And so one of the areas that we really capitalize on as FINGO is to do research that supports our member organizations to then be able to partner well, to innovate, and to incorporate technology in their work. And so recently, well, not recently, 2 years ago, we launched a study, and we just wanted to understand the status of NGO private sector collaboration in Kenya. So FINGO works or supports different country programs, but this research was only focused in Kenya. And interesting insights came up. Now, Mishek only gave me 10 minutes for this, so I'll not be able to do any justice to this, to the research that I hope can carry forward the conversation. But then again, if you'd want to get the entire research, it's in our website. I've put a link there. I'm sure the presentations will be shared to everybody after this. So there's a link there in our website, and you'll be able to get under resources the research on NGO private sector collaboration in Kenya. And would you want me to continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Please give us a bit of these snippets.
Okay.
And some of the learnings that came through.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So just to highlight what the research wanted to bring out is first to understand the facilitating factors, partnership, and also we were keen to showcase successes and challenges of this kind of partnerships. And we also wanted to share several recommendations based on the learnings that we picked. And so, yes, so we worked and interviewed different organizations across the country, both private sector and NGOs, and we also interviewed those that are already partnering. And just to give a basis or a background of this, of the Kenyan ecosystem, 10,000 NGOs. So the NGO ecosystem slide, kindly. So we have over 11,000 NGOs in Kenya. So NGOs and civil society organizations as well. At the time of the research, we had over 8,893 that were active. By active, we mean those that are submitting their returns to the NGO Council and they have active projects going on. So already you can see the potential that is there for anyone who would want to collaborate with NGOs. There are lots and lots of them in different sectors. So there are a number that are not active as at the time of the research, over 2,000, and it could have been because they don't submit their returns, or at the time of the research, they did not have ongoing projects. So that just gives you an idea of the NGO ecosystem and the potential that there is for partnership. And employing over 40,700 employees, over 30,000 interns, and 1,500 expatriates. And their contribution is over 1 century for it. So the next slide sort of gives a background or an introduction to the private sector ecosystem. So now, two major segments that we already know of. We have the formal and the informal. Now, for purposes of the research, we focused more on the formal sector, mostly because the informal sector in Kenya is not well organized. It's quite a large sector, but it's not, very well organized. So we focused on the formal sector, and then the private sector, formal sector, private sector side has two different, components. We have companies that are well established, they are running, and they are already making profits. But then there's another also very vibrant and big sector that is the startup ecosystem in Kenya. And I think Kenya is one of the countries that's really leading in terms of startups. And quite a number of them have been able to go into the market and start, making profits. And quite a number are still in the, in the startup stage and testing stage. So again, then you get to get a picture of the private sector and where we can plug in as NGOs if we want to partner with them. So the next, we want to look at the why. I mean, why then do people, so you'll find that for private sector, the reason or the why they want to partner is to increase their market, their value chain, to be able to share their learnings, their resources, to create new products. And one other thing that really came up is that through partnerships, they unlock new markets and they reduce the risk. So as they're unlocking new markets, when they partner with NGOs or with other corporations, they reduce the risk of, unlocking those new markets. For NGOs, the main reasons why NGOs partner is for sustainability and scalability. Of course, there's the other reason of finances. They want to increase their capacity, they want to increase their resources so that they're able to reach, research was for sustainability. The reason being companies stay longer, especially when they make profit, they stay longer. And once communities adopt the products, then they are able to continue, making the social changes even after the life of the NGOs has ended, once the projects are closed. And as we know, NGOs are struggling with budget cuts. There's a lot of peer competition. There's rising program costs. And, the ever-growing criticism over their inability to end extreme poverty. So to deal with this, NGOs are partnering with private sector players to bring in more resources and also to be able to scale their impact across the community. So the next slide continues to, the research was very wide and we got quite a number of responses across. But here I just summarized, in a bit of detail, some of the things that came up from the field on the motivations for NGOs. As I mentioned earlier, the resources was one of the key things, and innovations, because then if you want to innovate as an NGO, you want to bring in the technical skills, especially of the startups, because they're always developing new things and coming up with new solutions. So when NGOs want to innovate more and have extra resources for their work, then they look out for private sector players. The other one I would want to highlight from that, I'll not read through, but the one I want to highlight from there is that private sector players inject an entrepreneurial mindset in the communities. As we all know, NGOs sort of work through the social lens, but private sector is able to bring, the aspect of business, making business out of community needs, out of social problems. And once that is injected in communities, then the change is lasting, it's sustainable. Now, for private sector players, the motivation mostly is NGOs are seen to understand the community needs more, and the interconnectedness of community needs. Private sector players appreciate that. And sort of when they partner with NGOs, they give them some, so it makes it easy for the private sector players then to introduce their new products or to do product testing or, to work on their value chains and, just to do more business in the communities. So they base it on we all know development players are very good at convening communities, convening at national level, convening at global level, and so private sector players want to be able to plug into that and reduce the expenses that they would have to incur if they were to do the convening themselves. So that really came out as another reason why private sector players want to partner with NGOs. And of course, the other one, the main one, is all corporate, so everyone wants to do good. So partnering with NGOs is one of the ways that private sector players want to do good, to go beyond the bottom line, do more beyond profits. So they use NGOs as one of the channels for that. And so different models have been used, and we can go to the next slide to, just interrogate the different models that have been used in partnership between NGOs and private sector. And what you see on the screen now, and hoping that everyone can see, so the photo. So what you see on the screen now, so this is Makueni, one of the smaller towns in the larger Makueni County. And I tell you what, these are women groups. The picture doesn't do justice to the number of women who are sitting on this ground on this day. So it's, it's over 200 women who come together and they do chondos. And these chondos are marketed in baskets, in case someone listening in is not a Kenyan. So the baskets are marketed in Europe. And how this works is that there's a company that does the entire marketing. So they get the markets, they determine the quality, the sizes, the numbers, and they also work on the value chain. So how will they be transported? How do they ensure, all the logistics of getting to the European market? It's a private. And interesting that the NGO works on sanitation. So their program is on sanitation and livelihoods. But they've been able to incorporate a private sector player who brings what I talked about, the entrepreneurial approach, into the work of the NGO. And what they are seeing over time is that even their water and sanitation program is slowly becoming like, a business in itself. So these women and their families are able to convert or to look at social needs from a business perspective. That's one of the things we've really seen from these projects. And a lot of learning also came up from this, and I hope we'll have time to interrogate that further. But this is just an example of one model. So different models have been used, and we can have a look at them in the next slide. but there's no one size fits all for NGO private sector collaboration. There are as many as the number of institutions, because you'll find some are, the basic one, the CSR, where, corporates give money to a certain cause in an NGO. But then you get others where it's sort of financial, technical, and in-kind support. And I've given an example of the We Economy project of World Vision, where they've gone further than just giving funding, but they work together. They have sort of integrated their programming for the benefit of the NGO and the private sector players as well. We have strategic partnerships where you get organizations that share complementary skills and resources. So I've given an example of one of the corporates we interviewed, Arifu. So they develop digital education products. And in this case, I partnered with Heifer International to develop education materials on improved livestock keeping and poultry farming. And Heifer International were providing the content and providing a base for Arifu to develop their content. And it was mutually beneficial for all of them, because Arifu could sell their product outside Heifer International, but then Heifer were able to reach more people in the community at lower costs. So, it was scalable for both of them. Now the other one is systemic partnership. It's more longer term, and it looks at a broader community problem. And private sector player, NGO, then decide to go into that and tackle a specific problem in the community, bringing in their capacity and their resources together. So as I mentioned, the models of partnerships are as many as the number of organizations, and it's upon each organization, as they discuss, as you come together, decide what model you'd want to take. Right, so we don't just, as we finish, look at a partnership framework, sort of like a way forward. So here we are as an NGO, here we are as a private sector player, and we are thinking that maybe we need to start partnering with private sector players, or we want to start partnering with an NGO. So where do we start from? What's the way forward? And we summarized all that into this table, sort of a framework that you can work around. There's a lot of detail that goes to each of these steps, the 4 steps you've outlined. But I just want to highlight that the very first initial step, very key, is internal alignment. So it's for the organization, private sector or NGO or academia, to internally align the objectives so that then they can identify the specific problems that they want to partner with an NGO, because then each organization has a myriad of objectives, and I would imagine only a few can be addressed through partnership. So there's that need to identify which areas they want to partner in, and this area should be based on a specific need in the community and a specific need for the company. So for the company, maybe their need is they want to grow, or maybe for the company, their need is they want to establish new markets in a region that NGO is working in. So it's important and imperative that every organization does internal reflection to identify what are the problems that they want to address through partnerships. Then the next one then would be to identify and select the right partner. So there's a whole partnership selection criteria that we came up with. I may not go into details at this point, but you could get it in the report. But it's more looking at, do your partners or those that you'd want to partner with, are they in the geographical region that you want to cover? Do they have a good track record, So the objectives that you want to achieve through the partnership, does that partner have a good track record of achieving, those kind of objectives? And you also want to be able to look at their expertise in the proposed thematic area, right? So if you want to partner in the area of children, education, gender equality, livelihood support, so does the partner have the requisite technical skill and expertise in it? And of course, there are other things to look out in terms of compliance, legal compliance. Do they have the institutional capacity, to carry out the partnership in terms of technical resources, and, the support from management for the partnership to flourish. So it's important to look at all these things so that when you get in the partnership, you're not then shocked, halfway to realize that this partner doesn't actually have the money. They have the intention, but they don't have the money to finance their head off, or they don't have the technical capacity to support the partnership. So it's important to interrogate all these parameters before you get into the partnership. So once you've identified the partner and you've selected, the next phase would be to implement. Now they say, and the one thing that really came out from the research is the phase of implementation is where the success of a partnership is tested, It could be all rosy and nice when you're identifying the partner. There is need to co-design again. So as an organization, you have your objectives, what you want to achieve, but there's again need to co-design your joint objectives. You want to be sure that you have some joint parameters, joint objectives that you want to achieve, but you also want to make sure that the partnership is mutually beneficial. So different co-design mechanisms are used. Some used like the human-centered design thinking, where you look at, bring different players and get to listen into the actual needs and, design together. And many other participatory methods have been used to co-design, but again, it's very critical that you co-design your partnership. And the other thing I would want to highlight here is the need to document the protocols, document the partnership through an MOU. And each of the partners' roles should be very well articulated. What are they bringing into the partnership in terms of resources, in terms of capacity, and then also have very clear communication lines. Some of the partnerships didn't work out well because, the communication. So it's important that you have very clear communication lines. And again, at this point, it's also very important that you have already preset, outcomes that are put in the partnership implementation framework. So every partner, if it's a private sector player, they already need to know what does success look like for us, So if you're a private sector player, so say for example, Arifu want to have a product that they can be able to sell on improved livestock keeping. That for them is what success looks like, and they need to be very clear on that. While say for Heifer International, they want to be able to reach more farmers to have, more impact and scale in terms of livestock or poultry keeping. So each partner needs to have very clear objectives of what they want to draw from the partnership. There will be other add-on, results as a result of the partnership, but it's good to document the ones that must be achieved. So then, implementation will take a while, but it's also important to do evaluation and access sustainability. So continuous monitoring. So different partners had different monitoring frameworks. But what is really, really important to monitor on a continuous basis is how the partnership is working. Check around communication, around management commitment from both sides, to continue allocating resources to the partnership, monitor progress towards the successes, monitor progress towards the outcome, and then again also monitor issues of, are you achieving, as an organization, are you achieving your outcome? We interacted with some organizations that felt that their value has actually been drained from the partnership. Right? Maybe because some of them went into a partnership with an organization that they felt was too good. Everyone wants to partner with big corporates. But because they are not very clear on what really they wanted from that partnership, it just sounded sweet and nice. Over time, they felt their value had been drained and they had not really been able to achieve much. So it's important to always track progress towards attaining your value or attaining your objectives as a partner. Yeah, and so there are many things to check out for. And just in conclusion to say, at the stage of implementation, you also need to be clear on your pathways to scale. So after the partnership, do you want to scale the partnership? Do you want to scale geographically, or do you want to increase more after maybe the 5 years or the 3 years? What are your exit strategies? So those also need to be well articulated in your MOU as partners, and that reduces potential conflicts towards the end. So as I mentioned, I mean, get a number of tools that you can use. But for me, as a parting shot, as we leave the room today and go out there and want to start this, just to give you a starting point, it would be through questions. You interrogate whether you're a private sector player or an NGO, look inwards and ask yourself, what opportunities do you see in your organizations as potential for private sector collaboration if you're an NGO? And then think through possible problem statements that can be solved through the partnerships or through collaboration. And that will set a basis for you to start off the process. The other thing that's critical to look at is, as you internally assess yourselves, you look at what are the enablers, conducive environment. And in this case, the internal environment is what you will be scanning. And one that I would want to highlight that came up is a strategy. In many ways, our strategies could be disenablers to collaboration because they didn't give room for that. We had 5-year strategic plans that didn't give room for that. Are they flexible enough to allow for new models of working? And again, look at many other aspects of your organization and see what needs to be changed for you to be able to bring in more collaboration between yourselves and other players in the industry. So again, thank you so much, and I hope we can continue this conversation further.
Terry, thank you so much. That is a mouthful. It's so elaborate, and as Terry has just mentioned, there is much more on this, particularly from the larger research that is available on the website. I want to pause here and go back to our team. We want to look back just to digest a little bit what Terry has taken us through. Some polling questions that we put together. We would want the members who are online just to take these polling questions, to look through our organizations, where we sit. I want to let our technical team to throw that online as we come back here. And I want to lead us through this discussion. Please welcome, Judy.
Thank you so much, Mike. I want to, based on Terry's presentation, what stood out most as a framework for successful partnership? I would probably pick Philip. Henry, sorry, Henry.
Right. Thank you very much, and that was a very elaborate study. I look forward to reading the details for better understanding, so also to learn from it. Just a point here. When you look at philanthropy from the private sector perspective, what we call the feel good, we are now transitioning. In fact, we've already transitioned from what we call CSR, corporate social responsibility, to corporate social investment, where we just don't want to have the communities, say that Safaricom, is a good organization. They make us feel good. To come and say Safaricom has enabled us to be self-sustaining as an institution or as a community. So they need to really transform from philanthropic kind of partnerships to transformational partnerships, or what we can call from transactional to transformational. That links to the study here that we can still even move beyond strategic or transformational to even partnership needs to be defined at the start. What do we need to achieve, and how are we aligned as partners? Once you define how success will look like in the beginning, then the rest will fall into place, because that informs the kind of framework, measurement framework that you need to put in place. Exactly, what's your vision, what's my vision, where do we meet? And then the other one is when, for example, you meet a colleague KCDF and meets, for example, Safaricom. Maybe KCDF will ask me, Safaricom, do you have money? Or I meet ActionAid, and ActionAid tells me, Henry, we have a need in Wajir. Which conversation will you be interested in? Is it the conversation about Safaricom, do you have money? Or is it the conversation that communities in Wajir are going without water? I'll go with the, I start with the need first. Because it is the need that will drive the money, isn't it? Because, okay, tell me more about Wajir, not the money. People will be able to listen to you more, and then the money will come later. Not that money is not important, because definitely we also need these financial resources to resolve some of these challenges. Now, so the vision, the shared value will now form the basis of the framework and what you want to achieve. There will be the issue of the, just to expound on the implementation that came up during the study here, it's about agreeing on jointly, the key word is jointly, agreeing on key parameters that you will be able to jointly track and then say whether it's working or not. Most of the partnerships focus on what is working and forget. Take time to look at what is not working, because that is where the learning is. Be free, because it's partnership and you are there from an equity perspective. Not you together, redesign, it came out here in terms of co-designing, and course correct. Be able to have the courage to say, it is not working. Let's go back to the drawing board. Remember, the vision, the goal is not changing. But how we get there, we have room to be more flexible in all the aspects to ensure that we get to what we achieved. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And this is to you, Grace. What would you say are the major roadblocks to this kind of partnerships?
First, no, I should ask him, I should attack it in a different way, on a lighter.
Sure.
In terms of the roadblocks to partnerships and the challenges that we have, it comes from a power conversation. How do we see, or where do we see power lying? And do we have honest and open conversations like what Henry is talking? For us as KCDF, we're not trying to be a Safaricom Foundation. Everyone has their designate work that they do, their area of influence, what they're able to deliver on, and being able to tap into the strengths. I think that also boils down to some of the obstacles or the hindrances we have to partnerships. I think another key issue is in terms of the blockages we have in our thinking and in our minds, the stereotypes that we have around those who are in private sector and those who are in the not-for-profit sector. We need to dismantle some of these stereotypes. And I think it's great that ActionAid is having this conversation, because it starts to dismantle that. We can have, like the example that Terry spoke to, in terms of you have, even if it's an not-for-profit organization that is having its objectives met. So some of these challenges or obstacles are things that are already being worked on. Common conversation around different platforms, the platforms that EAPN also presents in terms of bringing together both the corporates, corporate foundations, and those in the not-for-profit sector, those who are in the development sector. I think if we continue talking to each other, we'll continue to dismantle some of these blockages that have been there and be able to really have our focus on communities. Because ultimately, as Henry has said, ultimately we're here to work for the betterment of communities. And so how can we continue to speak and come together on that platform?
Thank you, Grace. And I will jump, Susan, and go to Grace. Maybe you give us recommendations to corporates and NPOs seeking to build what I'll call feasible collaborations. Any recommendations, one or two? I know you had mentioned about that. Sorry.
Okay. Right. And I would want to build it on what Grace and Henry have talked about on the need, looking at the need of the communities. And come from the point of what's a partnership all about? Are we designing the solution? Because again, when you come together as a partnership, you sort of have a new product. It's not an NGO, solution. It's not a private sector solution. You have some sort of joint project that you're working towards. The question I would want to pose as you go further in that partnership is, who are you designing for? And there's need to, we could design for ourselves. So we say, as FINGO, we want to increase uptake of water or health services in a certain community. That is our goal. And the private sector player we want to work with wants to make, some money around, water services. But the question is that the need of the community? And is that the real need that they want addressed? Could there be another need that then will solve that issue? So there's need to co-design or design for the ecosystem, and look at the larger economic, political, and other geopolitical, social issues as you design your partnership. And the aspect of also looking at the risks, I think I didn't mention that. It's good to interrogate what are the risks for this partnership. And there could be different risks, issues of finances, issues of the political changes in that locality, issues of mitigate the risks. So there's a lot to look at as you go into partnership, but those are some of the highlights that would then lead to a successful partnership.
Thank you, Terry. We'll take it back to Mike for the next session.
What as we look at some of these arising issues here,
aware of the non-negotiables. And remember, when you're talking as a profit organization and a non-profit, the bare minimum for everyone is that the community is not left out. Yeah. The community is at the center stage. Yeah. So everything about your programming, your design, your thinking, your funding, summed up in, I can talk of two principles. One of the principles, we use it mainly during humanitarian work, so that we are bringing all the stakeholders in place, in one place. One, we say that when you're working in a humanitarian context, there's a signature, 3 signatures that you have to embed within your approach, whether you're engaging with a donor, a corporate, and any other stakeholder, including government as a duty bearer. Number one is that you look at the leadership. Who is leading this process? Who's coming at the forefront? For us, we start off by saying, let the communities lead. Let them come at the forefront. So it means one of the parties in the tripartite has to ensure that they're building the capacity of the communities. And that's where we come in as ActionAid. And I know KCDF has that kind of capacity of building that capacity of the communities to take ownership, to negotiate, to design, and even report back. Then secondly, there's the aspect of localization. That ActionAid may be at a position, a better position to negotiate with a corporate and have the funds coming in, but everything else has to be localized, because that's where the work happens. The work happens at the community, results are with the community members, the impact will be felt by the community members. And the third one, of course, is accountability, that we commit to remain accountable. So that's the first signature, the principles that we use when you're looking at the humanitarian work. And it's supposed to bring in everyone. It brings in the duty bearer, it brings in the community, and it brings in the funding partner or an implementing partner. Meshach, if you can project. The next set of principles that we have adopted as ActionAid, somebody had projected it. We call it feminist leadership principles. So women leadership, women's rights. In fact, many people, when you talk of ActionAid, they say, ile organization ya wamama, or that organization that defends women. And if you go to the community and you ask people in the market, we do these random walks, like you're visiting, you're monitoring a project, and in the evening you walk into the market, have you heard of ActionAid? And they tell you, why? We know that organization. The CBOs that work with them, if you touch a girl, they'll come for you. If you violate a woman, they'll come for you. So we've been known for the women leadership, and probably just to go back to the 3 signatures in the humanitarian, much as we are talking of community leadership, but the 50 years has helped us to come to a point where it is non-negotiable that women leadership in emergencies is important. So even when you're partnering with a corporate, you're partnering with a fellow implementing partner, is to bring in this expertise and push people to see why we talk of women leadership in the community. Because the face of poverty that you're fighting and changing is with the women, most of the cases. So I come to the feminist leadership principles in Action Aid. If you look at this, it's a 10 basics of feminist leadership. And we use them to help us look into a partnership, look into modalities of engagement. Some of them have been mentioned. Grace spoke of dismantling bias. You also spoke about shifting or sharing power. You know, I'm coming into a conversation. You are viewing me as having the money. But as a non-profit and a community, you also need to sit and appreciate the stakeholder, the funding partner who's coming in with the money, that they have recognized something in you. They've recognized the need, they've recognized your capacity, and probably they've recognized the aspect that you can be held accountable. And so they come into this relationship to ensure that you are helping them meet their objective as you meet your objective and the community meets its objective. So that's why sharing power is very important. But most of the times we look at eventually shifting that power to the community because they are the ones who have the right to engage with the duty bearers. We can only create platforms if we want them to succeed. If we want them to showcase their program to other funding agencies or other partners other than us, then they must have the power. So that's why in these 10 basic principles, and it will be shared, we look at, are you aware that you're holding some power? That when you go into the negotiation, you will allow somebody else who feels powerless to also exercise the power that is in them. But most importantly is also taking care of yourself, because you're coming into this partnership as a representative. Have you taken care of what your organization stands for? But are you helping the other party to take care of what their organization stands for? And then the inclusion. Many a times, and this is the debate that is on, what do we mean by inclusivity? Is it about staging someone or allowing them and giving them a voice and enabling them to act as they come in? Then the aspect of being responsible and being transparent, but also accountability has been mentioned here. It has to be an accountable collaboration. When you're asking of me to report, the first question would be, did I enable your capacity to be able to report back? Are you comfortable to report the way I want you to report? If not, it is my responsibility to enable you. And then, of course, giving, how do we share feedback? We've seen partnerships that have crumbled just because of how feedback was shared. Was it done in a respectful manner? But did we enable each party to feel courageous enough to openly speak without feeling reprimanded? Many organizations and community organizations, for that matter, have accepted funding and failed to speak when they can actually see that the other partner in the agreement is actually overbearing. And in the end, they do not deliver, funds are lost, respect is lost, and the partnership dies. And of course, the last one, which is a major one, and it's a topic of interest, especially if you're talking about Kenya as a nation, and talking about duty bearers, is the zero tolerance to corruption, zero tolerance to discrimination. Are you bold enough to say no to strands or activities that would lead you into corruption? Because if you are in partnership and you cannot stand corruption, then you actually say, this is a partnership that can succeed. So I just wanted to flag these 2 signatures, which have helped us as an organization, and we are also looking forward to ensure that going forward, we've done 50 years, we're looking into 50 years. That's why we are talking about a lot of collaboration. How do we share these with the organizations that we'll be working with and the corporates, and how do we influence each other? because influencing each other towards the direction that at the end of it benefits the community is what we look for, or we look out for as an organization. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. I mean, time runs very quickly, but I want to come back to Henry. Co-creation, co-designing. You did indicate that it does not deviate from the vision and the mission if we honestly look at each other and say, we need to go back to the drawing board. How do these partnerships approach challenges of co-creation, co-designing when it touches these issues of accountability? When a partner may not be open on one hand, and the other one is living in the current word, in opaqueness.
Thank you very much. I would have answered very quickly that if one of the partners is not open,
Is opaque.
Yeah.
leave the partnership. It's as easy as that.
Yeah.
However, if you look at co-creation, is to answer the question, why do we want to co-create? One of the challenges that, we face and also other partners face is, and we know this, people sit in a boardroom in Nairobi or in Kisumu or in your house and think of a community in Makueni, say, these are the needs of this particular community, without having involved the right stakeholders, the most important being the community. And what that happens is you design a program without the real issues, because change happens every now and then. And we work with the communities which are very dynamic. Co-creation is important, and it can only work, or it works when there is trust, there is openness, and people are willing to be scrutinized. If, for example, as Safaricom, we are co-creating a program, let's say with KCDF, whom we've worked before on an ECD program, which we call Know and Grow. We need, one, KCDF should be able to answer the questions that we have. And Safaricom should also be willing to answer the questions that KCDF has. It's about equity here, fairness to all. The issue of trust does not happen overnight, because it takes time for one organization to trust the other, just the way it takes time for an individual to trust the other. So that, and then we all have that trust. And then the issue of agreeing to take risks together, because if we are going to, for example, to Wajir, if I use that example, we must take the risk of one. We are going to Wajir, we are going to engage with the community, as Susan has said, and then we are going to develop the program together. And then if it doesn't work, because I am the resource provider, and maybe ActionAid, because they are very good in community engagement, I have held them accountable. Will I start pointing fingers to ActionAid? No. It is, we share the failures together, we share the risks together, we take the risks together, and we also share the celebrations. Otherwise, it becomes like them versus us, or him versus me, or her. Now, the last one is about each organization has policies. There is what they fund, and there's what they cannot fund. Yeah. For example, you find some organization, and I've seen one of the participants online asking about some corporates are not able to fund some costs. And that is based on policies, for example. You may find, for example, an organization is willing, as we co-create, and that needs to come early, that needs to come in early, that as we co-create, please note, we don't fund this type of costs. This is what we fund. And if we are in agreement, then we can continue. Otherwise, there's no need of co-creating a program, engaging the community, engaging the government, engaging other stakeholders, and come and say, okay, fine, that cost, we will not. State the rules before you start, so that we can opt in or opt out. Now, I want to bring in the county governments, because we are in Kenya. There are critical or key stakeholders that need to be involved in this. Remember, all what we are doing as corporates, as NGOs, must contribute to an overall national development framework.
Right.
Is it contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, which we have committed as a government to? Is it contributing to Vision 2030? Is it contributing to whichever development framework or blueprint? That's very, very important. If it's in health, ensure you are in line with the Ministry of Health priorities, education, youth, name it. Otherwise, you'll be working in parallel with a government system. And remember, I don't think whether there is an organization like an NGO or private sector that has the capability of scaling a program nationwide, except with the government.
Yes.
The best sustainability framework is to have this systematized within a county framework or a national framework to be assured of the exchequer funding this. Otherwise, you will create dependency, as we've seen in some regions here, where once a program closes, then everything else stops. Do we want to get to that? No. The best thing is involve the right stakeholders, especially the national government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Grace, the question of social justice, the question of involving women, marginalized groups, the youth, versus the duty bearers, and this within the partnerships. What has been the experience of KCDF, particularly knowing that you've been implementing on the ground, you've been supporting groups on the ground? How do we devolve, in that sense, decision-making and participation of these groups?
Thanks Mike for that. For us, our experience as KCDF is recognizing that communities are diverse. And as a community is diverse, you will have vulnerable groups within the community, you will have women within the community, you will have young people within the community. So even for our community projects, that has to be taken into consideration. And also what comes to the fore is that because of historical injustices, because of patriarchy, there has been misalignment in terms of how different sections of community have been treated. So even when it comes to our work and even our partnerships, we do have a lot of our corporate partners saying we recognize there's been marginalization for this particular section of society. Yeah. What can we do to assist in that particular area? So there's a lot of growth in that area. There's a lot of appreciation of the long historical marginalization that has happened. And so even when it comes to designing innovative projects, with the community taking lead, we have to recognize that within that community, there are different centers of power. How do we make sure all the voices come up, especially from the vulnerable groups that would have a difficulty speaking out about their needs and their desires? On social justice, I think it's an area of growth for us as a country. You will find that it's easier for corporates to support your more development-centric, your livelihoods projects, work around humanitarian response, as opposed to access to justice issues, governance issues. And we understand our context, we understand the challenges that have been there, but it's an area of growth. Even within Africa, there are conversations happening around how do we grow philanthropy around social justice? How do we be able to hold government accountable without it being seen that you're going to be blacklisted by government or that you're fighting government? Because if government has the same mind that we have, that we're community-centric, then it is in their interest also for there to be accountability. It's in their interest for there to be access to justice. It's in their interest for there to be social justice. And so just dismantling some of these historical misconceptions around what social justice is, what we're working around in terms of improving governance in our country, I think that's an area for growth that we can always expand. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Terry, I want to jump to you.
Yeah.
You did talk around issues of technology, uptake of technology, the innovations that are coming up. And you did point out Kenya is one of those countries leading in technology.
Yeah.
What role is technology and the uptake of technology and the innovations that are coming up. What role do they play in partnerships? Particularly looking at a country like ours, where there are so many of this coming through. How should we factor in the use of technology in creating some of these partnerships?
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I'd actually say for now, technology seems to be a big driver in terms of sustainable development. A lot of things are anchored on technology development. How well are you adopting to new technology? And these can be seen or can be plowed back into how we uptake partnerships. So there are two ways of looking at these. As technology as an enabler for the partnership, using it to, do the usual, communication, to adapt to your administrative procedures. But then again, we can look at technology as the reason for the partnership itself. It's a drive behind the been seen that it's easier to partner around technology solutions because then they improve the business processes for the NGOs. So I think technology has a big part to play in how each individual organization works and as well in how the partnership works. And to mention also technology is shaping how things are done. So maybe to just reference what Grace has said, social justice issues. Do we probably then need to relook our approach to social justice, issues of governance? And it's something I've actually thought about in the past as I was interrogating this space of private sector partnership with NGOs in the governance sector. Could there be room for technology adoption in our governance programs that then will bring in private sector players? Because they don't want to engage in conversations on good governance, accountability for their own reasons, but then private sector players would be willing to invest in technologies that enable social justice. So say, for example, public participation. They would be willing to plug in their expertise and their resources in technology solutions that enable public participation, in technologies that enable access to justice, speedier access to justice, and many other areas around social justice. Even issues of, one of the areas that I also see a lot of potential and technology can be deployed is in terms of disability inclusion. A lot of conversation around what is bringing them on board for meetings, giving them a space and a voice, but then looking further beyond that, schools, can even in our county governments, can a person who is disabled be able to access the county government offices? Someone who is not seeing, someone who is not reading, can they participate in governance processes? And that is where I see a big role in technology, enabling inclusion of people living with disabilities at community level and addressing their need, their specific need, and removing those barriers that they have for participation. And there are lots and lots of innovations around that, around technology solutions for PWDs that then NGOs can adopt and continue into partnership with private sector players. So it's looking beyond the technology solution itself, but looking at how technology addresses the needs of the community. And the needs are myriad. So as I mentioned, we have issues of governance, issues of disability inclusion, issues of women, empowerment and women inclusion, and men as well. What are the barriers to effective participation of all the players in the communities? And bringing on board technology as the easier solution to bringing everybody on board. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Henry.
Thank you. Because I work for Safaricom, you'll allow me to comment still on technology.
Yeah, I was coming back. Right.
Thank you very much. Before I joined the private sector, but still pursuing my purpose around community transforming of communities, I worked in the NGOs for quite some time, and allow me to give you my experience working or interacting with community-based organization, what we call CBOs, at the village level. The study has shown here that we have so many, and when you go to the NGO board, there are hundreds of thousands. Right. When HIV/AIDS was a real challenge in this country, when there were issues, there were challenges around treatment, issues around home-based care for people living with HIV and AIDS, we had organizations or NGOs based in Nairobi who had good funding from different donors doing home-based care. But who was really doing the home-based care? Who was really doing home-based? Is it Henry, who is a senior program manager in Nairobi? No. Or a community lady at the village level who is visiting Jane or Grace or Kyoko or James, and ensuring that they are providing counseling, they're ensuring that they are being cared for psychosocially and psychologically and things like that. It was the CBOs who were really doing this work.
At the grassroots.
At the grassroots level. Yes. Our role is getting reports, synthesizing those and sharing with the funder. And then ensuring at the policy level we have engagement, there are guidelines, which is also very good. But my point is this: who knew what these community-based organizations were doing? Nobody. You go to the grassroots and find, wow, there's this good organization doing community-based care for people living with HIV and AIDS. There is this youth group who are doing a very good economic empowerment program, but nobody knows what they are doing. Technology comes in. If we use technology, we have the potential to tell the story to a wider audience, not just locally, but nationally and also internationally. And what that may do is somebody out there may be looking for similar initiative that can be scaled and then approach that group. That group already has proved that it can work. And then now, technology has enabled the communication, the documentation, the communication. And then they now come and support our level. Because assuming, for example, it's an innovation or is a program that can be put in an app, provided you have access to a smartphone, provided you are in the 47 counties and there is good connectivity, you can benefit from that service. Or you can have a feature phone, and if it's a USSD, you can still have that access. And some of the initiatives that have worked and used technology, they are not as complex. Simple reminders to mothers to go for ANC. Simple reminders to people living with HIV/AIDS to go to restocking of ARVs. Simple reminders for parents to have conversation experience, and especially at the community level, is that most community issues do not require complex solutions. The issues may be complex, but you'll find the solution is very, very cheap and very, very simple. So technology comes in now to help, in addition to what we're discussing. Lastly is on accountability, which is key area in partnerships. That if, for example, a partner may feel that, oh, how do I get data? How do I get reports? How do I get financial data? Get to technology, have partners do self-reporting, and from the back end or where you are able to get all these reports and share, then be able to engage and ask questions. So as I think it's Terry, yes, I said, technology provides, it's an enabler to address so many challenges that, we face in managing strategic partnerships. Thank you.
Henry, just to stretch that a little bit, in terms of then partnerships, often what we have just mentioned, the CBOs, the small organizations working at the grassroots, often look at big corporates, big organizations as a minefield to partner with. I would just want you to throw in a few words. Partnering with huge organizations, big names, Safaricom and others, is almost a minefield. Yep. Often, I'm sure online they will ask, how do I start even to approach the big organizations? Because then that is where scalability of what we have done on the ground would be hopefully be picked up. Hopefully we can be able to get the feet to start carrying this about. How, where do I start?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. And I know it's a question which applies to so many Kenyans out there. They have heard of Safaricom, for example, or other corporate.
Yes.
Where do I start? I think that's a key question. The first thing to do is, what is the need? I think that's the starting point. What is that community need, or what is that opportunity that you want, the need that you want to solve? I think that's the starting point. And once that is clear, then you move to the next. Who now can partner with me, or who can I approach now for me to partner in this? I would say there are so many ways. One, thank God we have technology. Initially, those years, it was only maybe through a letter, or through a phone call, or through fax, where you can get organizations. But now you have the websites, you have the social media, you have phone calls, and all the information, for example, on how to engage with Safaricom is out there. We have our websites, safaricomfoundation.org, we have empesafoundation.org, we have LinkedIn accounts, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, and others. In most towns in this country, whether it's a Safaricom shop or it's even an agent's shop, and you can get to any of those shops and you can be able to reach us. Now, when you have that opportunity, and it has worked as one who has also worked in the programs, you're going through the applications and you find a very innovative program. It may be in a particular community in Moyale, for example, and you develop an interest in that and you quickly engage that organization. Remember, they sent to you, or they sent to Safaricom, other partner, and maybe they did not expect to be called, and it's always a surprise. Oh, they called us, and there we are engaging. And we now we don't go with what you proposed. We have to come to the ground. We have to really understand what the community need is. Maybe you designed that from a boardroom here in Nairobi. So we do that validation. And then we engage until now we get to a level where we say, okay, this is the need. This is how we want to solve it, and this is how success will look like, and these are the financial requirements. And then now we move to the next level, which is now the approvals by the respective trustees of either M-Pesa Foundation or Safaricom Foundation. Now, we have a criteria definitely, which is very, very important, that guides our engagement. And this is also available in our websites. One, it has to link with our areas of focus, that's the education, health, economic empowerment, environmental conservation, and water cross-cutting. We do not, for example, engage in partnerships that support only one religion, for example. Not that we do not work with religious institutions, we do, but if, for example, I am an SDA, for example, and the project will only support SDAs in Kenya, then we will not, because that's not inclusion. We need a program that cuts across all denominations. And then projects, for example, that have a lot of operations. Not that operations are not important, and maybe here is where people need to also differentiate. It can be training or it can be paying off staff, but that can also be a direct cost, because for that project to be delivered, you need human resource. So aligning on those very, very important. But when we realize, for example, out of, let's say, 10 shillings, 8 shillings are going to project operations, then to us that is not value for money. We also look at the innovation itself and the opportunity for scale. Are you just going to focus on 20 people? Not that 20 people are not very important, but is there likelihood for us to do this in 10, 15, 20 counties? Also, we look at opportunities to generate new knowledge, because that's very, very important, because we are not experts in community development. We are partnering with organizations that have deep connection with the communities. We look at, once we engage with you, are there likelihood now to generate also new information to improve the existing knowledge for us to do it better next time? In other words, what are the opportunities for us to learn? because it's through learning that now we get all these other new innovations that we can even go to other bigger organizations who are well-resourced. We can go to the government and provide the evidence that, oh, this has worked. Can we try to work? Can we also work together and see whether we can co-create a larger nationwide program that can benefit millions of Kenyans? So the question is, can you reach us? Yes. So many opportunities, as I've said. And also, when you see any Safaricom car branded, that's an agent of Safaricom or a Safaricom car. Please talk to the person in there and say, you want to engage the foundation. How can I reach the foundation? And definitely, you will get all the support that you need to reach us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henry. I want to go back to Judy. Judy has...
Yeah, I have a comment here from online listener, just speaking about Safaricom. The comment is, she starts with, is this the future? Corporates are starting and running their own non-profits as corporate foundations where they choose thematic areas, fund them, and do the community work themselves. For example, call for scholarships, select and monitor the students. Is this the future? Before this was under CSR, and the company would fund a non-profit working in that field. So is this where we're heading? Like corporates now taking away the CSO's work?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much. Allow me to define around 4 types of partnerships at Safaricom and M-Pesa. We are what we call funding partnership. A funding partnership is where we will also receive money from, let's say, a bilateral donor to implement. So we implement ourselves. For example, Safaricom is funded by Vodafone Foundation. So our donor is Vodafone. They give us money, and then we implement on their behalf. Then we have implementation partnerships. Implementation partnerships is now where we give money to KICD, to ActionAid, and other organizations to implement on our behalf. And then we have thought leadership, where now we bring it together, use evidence to influence the particular thinking to improve our practice. And then we have policy and advocacy. We are not experts in policy, but we will support or we will engage on discussions with experts in advocacy to pursue a particular agenda that may lead to change of policy. Now, with these 4, to answer the question, I would say no, in the sense that it will depend on how the corporate foundation is established. Is it established as a funder, or is it established as an implementer? What in the civil society we call the grant-making organizations. Now, for us as Safaricom, we are not implementers. We are, I would say, we fund or we provide resources to ensure the areas of focus are executed. Now, we do not select areas of focus ourselves. Every 3 months at Safaricom, we do a lot of studies. And we use that based on what do Kenyans want. And if, for example, you do a rapid survey in this country, you realize Kenyans want 3, there are many things, but priorities will be 1, not in order, but education, health, economic empowerment. I don't think whether there is a study which will say our immediate need is maybe to go on holiday or to go to, or sports. And I'm not saying that they're not very important, but out of 8, when you rank them, those 3 are the top. Because when you put people to earn, everything falls into place. Like what we call, what is the key effort that I need to do? Once I do that, everything else falls into place. If I have meaningful income, I'm able to go to school, I'm able to access healthcare. So economic empowerment. Then if I'm healthy, I'm able to carry on my daily activities, including economic empowerment. And then lastly, is about education. And that's the best investment that we can give to the current generation. So we do not select. Our prioritization on what we do is based on rigorous research, which we use our staff, and we also use our agencies who are experts out there. I said when I was starting, we are not experts in health, We are not experts in all those areas. And that's the reason we reach out to organizations that have core competencies in this area, so that we bring in our leveraging on, we bring in the resources, we bring in technology, we bring in the power of convening, and then now other partners now bring in their connection, deep connection with the communities, expertise in health, expertise in healthcare and those other areas, so that when we bring these together, we can achieve that bigger purpose.
Okay.
So the key thing to answer the question, it will depend on how the organization is founded.
Yeah.
If they were founded, for example, they were founded to say, we'll provide scholarship, I think there is nothing that prohibits them from paying direct to the school, because you save resources that instead of now having an intermediary, for example, that percentage you can pay maybe 20, 30 other fees for other children, for example. And I'm not saying that that is good or bad, but each organization have their own policies on how to work and deliver their mission.
Thank you very much, Henry. Grace, knowledge generation, and the value that it adds to partnerships. Through the lived experience of KCDF, how have you leveraged the knowledge that has been generated in the sector to actually inform the partnerships you've made over the years?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that question. For us as KCDF, we see knowledge gathering at different levels. We're able to gather knowledge through academic partnership. Recognize that communities have resources, and the resources that can be tapped into that include knowledge. So what practices have been successful within the community? Even those that we have forgotten because of what we would call, more of westernization. How can we tap into processes that have been enabled a community to take care of the most vulnerable? So we tap into that. We also tap into the knowledge, like I said, through partners. We've had very successful partnerships with learning institutions such as the Strathmore University, University of Nairobi, universities even beyond our borders, whereby we have focused on particular areas of study. We have looked at philanthropy. Why do people give? How do we grow giving? I know we've had this partnership even with EAPN in terms of looking at what are the incentives that drive Kenyans to give. And that has been able to lay the foundation for a lot of the work and the advocacy that we're doing. Partnerships with University of Nairobi around growing even our own expertise, whereby our own staff are able to go through intensive training around modalities around growing local resource mobilization, mobilizing support. And so those partnerships with the academia, with the communities as well, with the other organizations we work with, have propelled KCDF's work, recognizing that there is something for us to gather from any particular subset that we work with. I think has been something that we've been able to benefit from as KCDF, and recognizing that we don't know it all. We're not the repository of all information, but how can we leverage on what others know, and how can we recognize what others know? Sometimes they don't know that they know it, but how do you leverage on being able to amplify that knowledge?
Indeed, that is great. Susan, the 5 decades that you've lived and worked in Kenya, one of the things that came through from this study is the program staff, the people that you develop, that Grace has just mentioned in terms of growing our own people, our own implementers, the people who run the programs. How has collaborating with other organizations built back on the program staff? Let me put it another way. How do you attract and retain staff that has given you the success as Action Aid over the years?
That's an interesting question. Given that we went through a massive change management, but that was also motivated by COVID. Yeah. So I've been in Action Aid for 17 years. And I'd probably want to use my example, why I stayed in Action Aid for 17 years. I had moved from an audit firm as an auditor, moved into a corporate as an account manager, and then moved into an NGO as a finance manager. And then I got this job that just called for a capacity building accountant. And that's when I realized that I had passion that was reflected in the job. So, number one, I'll keep mentioning as I talk about the story. Number one is how is the organization designing the roles, but also enabling the staff to bring in not only the technical capacity, but also talent that they have. Because many of us, there's what we've trained into, but given an environment, we bring in the talent. And so the passion to train, to be in the communities, work with the communities, see them transform, a self-help group that could only write ng'ombe moja. You know, you give money and the next thing when you visit is ng'ombe moja. After engaging with them, they can now keep receipts. It gives you the motivation. The other thing also in an organization that there is space for staff to be creative. You find that staff tend to be retained. And creativity is not creativity to escape or evade processes, but creativity to bring in the knowledge that you have that can help solve a problem or initiate a new idea in the organization. And so I remember when we were talking about grants management, we were having challenges reporting back to donors. And so as I moved back to Nairobi, that was an opportunity. So that aspect of creativity. The other aspect is providing space for staff to engage. You can have as many and very well-informed, well-trained staff, but if they have no space to speak out, to engage, to share what they are bringing on board, and also to just share the challenges that they have, it becomes very difficult for them to stay. We've had staff who've stayed on, they tell you, your pay is not good. But when I look at the environment that you've created, and now this is the environment that is women-friendly. We were amongst the very first organizations to start engaging with other organizations and corporates, and just telling them, challenge yourselves. What are your policies that are enabling women to stay? How are you working with working mothers? We came in with flexible time. A working mother will always deliver if you allow her to take care of her children within that program. And so we would allow staff to engage with their line once or twice in a week, work from home, but deliver. Come in at 10 after you had started work early enough, then taking care of the children who are going to school. So that was more of the environment. We also look at policies. What are the policies that are there? And what is the compliance to these policies? In the NGO sector at the moment, we're looking at sexual harassment, we're looking at safeguarding, and many NGOs have suffered. We are national, have suffered by the way they execute policy. And in this particular one, you find that you can have female staff who are very good, who can work very well, but they are not motivated to stay, because when they turn, it is one harassment to the other. We are not saying it cannot be there. It can be there because we have people who have deviant behaviors, but as an organization, what have you put in place to curtail, to address, to reprimand, but also enable the staff to feel free that when I'm given space to speak, there'll be no retaliation. Staff development is also one thing. That as ActionAid, we were known as a capacity building organization. Until today, we are known as a training organization where when you need good staff, just come to ActionAid. You'll pick them from ActionAid. Someone will tell you how they've grown in the system. And when you listen to them, you find that they have built in mechanisms to work with their partners in a way that they deliver more by just engaging in the environment that they're in. So the staff capacity training is very, very important. You may think they want you to take them for PhDs or masters, but if you can afford, so be it. I mean, allow them. They are giving into the organization. They are there from 8 to 5. This is their first family. How do you convert that organization to be people-driven? And that's what I've seen ActionAid do. And I do believe that if an organization is to retain staff, those are some of the non-financial aspects that you may want to look into. But of course, salary is very, very critical. Critical review against the market, allowing flexibility to be able to go back and say, yes, we may have made this decision, but today, looking at the market, it's not the decision that we need to uphold. Let's go back and review. So being ready to review, because the market is changing. COVID has taught us a lot that the market is changing. The Ukraine crisis has brought in increased cost of living, that if you fail to start looking at the environment that you're creating, at the staff, at the salaries, at the benefits that you're giving, then you stand to lose. And organizations have suffered. ActionAid not exempted. So being very, very critical, but being very open with the staff that they participate in these processes. Every year, all our staff will participate in the planning. When we are doing salary reviews and assessments, we involve all the staff. So they know the kind of changes that are going to happen. When I choose to stay, I've chosen to stay because I can gauge what I'll be getting and look at the other non-financial benefits that are there. But bottom line is involvement, empowerment, and also solidarity with the team that you build within both NGO, non-profit, and also the profit sector. Yeah.
Very, very informative. Terry,
Yeah.
I want you to take us home.
Yes.
There were recommendations in this study that pointed towards effective partnerships. Having listened to these three big studies, some of these recommendations that you feel we need to take forward
Yeah.
in terms of growing effective partnerships between the non-profit, with private sector, with government,
Yeah.
how well prepared do we need to be?
Well, that's a broad question, but
Very
I'll make an attempt to summarize and give some recommendations. But I would want to state one thing that probably has not come up as yet in this conversation is, why do partnerships fail? Yeah. And if you look at the why, then in a way, then we are able to avoid those pitfalls that make partnerships fail. And why I wanted to highlight this is because of an organization that I interacted with. I'm passionate about what they do, climate change, but they deal with this through clean energies. The organization, I know they are okay with me mentioning them, called Biogas International. So they have a solution that turns waste, biodegradable waste to biogas. And that's their contribution to issues of climate change. So I remember this one time, they partnered with an organization in Kakuma refugee camp. And as a corporate, they made a lot of investment. They didn't have funding. So they were, investing from their reserves and from their profits in other projects. And I think they went in with a lot of excitement of what this project could be. How much biogas can be made from the mathenge weeds and, all these other biodegradable waste in Kakuma camps. And after 1 year of heavy investment in terms of manpower, in terms of the equipment that was needed, they still were not able to rake in profits. And then what happened over time is their energy went down. What would be called the fire in the belly sort of fizzled out. And the reason for that is probably what I had mentioned initially, is asking yourselves, what does success look like when you're going into the partnership? The reason I say this is they have partnered with county governments, the part of, I think, of Kisumu and now Kajiado in Gong Market. And those ones seem to bring the profits faster than their partnership with NGOs. And, understandably, so NGOs work in very marginalized areas, potential for profit is also minimized. So at the beginning of the partnership, it's very, very key that you evaluate yourself and think through what success looks out like for you. Because then maybe for Biogas International in Kakuma, success for them in that partnership was not necessarily profit in the first 2 years. They are, as we speak now, I think that they're making some substantial profit from the investment. Probably for them, success was market penetration, was more awareness of their product. It was more of testing, can the mathenge seeds or mathenge weeds produce biogas? you know, that is what success would have looked like for Biogas International, then they would not have felt like this partnership is not working. And so for me, that's a major recommendation I would want to make anyone going into partnership to really interrogate what is it they want from the partnership, to avoid it stagnating after 1 or 2 years, and feeling like you're not getting value, not getting value from the partnership. The other recommendation I would want to really make, maybe to the organizers of this forum, and I just want to borrow it from what FINGO has been doing over the years, is we've been trying or attempting to matchmake, you know, bring corporates and bring NGOs together for matchmaking. Because again, there was a question of, so where do we start? You know, we want an NGO to partner with us, as you know, Colgate Palmolive or a certain, you know, IT company. Then they wonder, where do we start from? You know, so we have this matchmaking platform that, you know, sort of aligns the different needs of corporates and NGOs. And once you get into that platform, then you're able to, you know, scan through different organizations, and it makes it easier for people then to see or to start their partnership. And I would hope that we can carry this forward and, you know, as Kenyan NGOs, sort of start a matchmaking platform, make it easier for people to get each other when they want to partner. And we have several times thought of, you know, the exhibitions that we very much know of, you know.
Yes.
So you go to the SARIT, you'll find an exhibition of only corporate sector who are in housing, or corporate sector who are in a certain, you know.
Fintech.
Yeah, fintech. And then another day you go to the same SARIT center and you find NGOs working on water on their own. And the question is, can we bring them together? Yeah. And when, say, Safaricom Foundation comes to that exhibition, they'll not come in as Safaricom, the ones who give us airtime and M-Pesa services, but they're coming in as Safaricom, the side that then funds, you know, foundations. You know, just bringing people together to have this kind of conversation. I think that space is missing, and it's something that we can tap into. And, you know, there are other organizations like KEPSA. I know at some point KEPSA used to have development players roundtable. I'm not sure if they're still having those now. Since COVID happened, I think they put a stall to them. I'm not sure if they're continuing virtually, but that's another space to look into, how to partner with KEPSA and, you know, Chamber of Commerce, and, you know, just bring all these business players and corporates into the conversation of collaborating with NGOs. A parting shot as well is the government. I think we would do a disservice to the government if we don't really appreciate their role in these partnerships. And I think in implementing SDG, in implementing Vision 2030, and implementing the midterm, the midterm plan, the government has really given space for collaboration between NGOs, private sector, and they've also enabled, you know, broadband connectivity across the country. I think that in itself has enabled a lot of, you know, technology solution absorption and people to be able to partner more. What Safaricom is rolling out and other IT firms in terms of education technology has been made possible by the broadband connectivity across the country. So we appreciate the government for that. Of course, throwing a request to Henry to look at the costs. They are still very prohibitive. So those sort of, in a way, also limit partnership because you roll out a solution, but communities out there cannot afford the bandwidth that is needed to access very, you know, everyday use kind of solutions. So it's something that you can also look at. So different recommendations for all of us to pick and move forward and think through.
Yes.
Maybe if you allow me to just add on to the comment on the government. For an environment to be enabling for both non-profits and the profit-making to thrive, you need legislation.
Definitely.
And the legislations that are there, then you need to translate them into policies. and how then they'll be implemented. So for a successful partnership, but if there are no policies that can guarantee sustainability of the investment that you've done, you're out. If there are no policies that can guarantee engagement to the community in your absence, you're out. And that actually takes me to the implementation approach, the model that we adopted. So when we were 35,
Right.
it's actually, I would say 15 years ago,
Yes.
the human rights based approach, where we said we will build solidarity with the communities. And in the process, we will empower them to know what are their rights and where to go for the same rights. But as we empower them, we also empower the government, because then the government is engaging with an informed community. Then you have to see how to build the capacity of the government to engage with the community.
Right.
Of course, there is that capacity, but trying to fine-tune it to respond to the community demands. And then the third element then became the advocacy.
Right.
What are the policies around this area that you're addressing? How do you advocate for either new policies or review of the policies and other pieces of legislation that you need to bring on board so that then the environment is enabling? And then beyond that, then you look at what alternatives exist. We could be working with archaic processes. And that's why when I hear from the panelists talking about innovations, knowledge creation, new ways of working, new solutions, for me, it's the way to go. And we see reason why we need to continue being in existence, again, for another 50 years, because there's still work that ought to be done. Appreciating government is also appreciating the model that organizations take. So I think Henry and equally Grace and Terry have alluded to it. What's the model that an organization is adopting? As ActionAid for over 50 years, for the 50 years, we've worked with around over 35 counties, if I use the current administrative locations. And our aim is to go in and stay there for 10 to 15 years. 10 years is the basic, the bare minimum. And we go in there, start working with the communities, identifying the problems and identifying solutions, and bringing in other stakeholders. And after 10 to 15 years, we then exit, believing that the community now has, they've built their capacity and capability to be able to run with the programs. But then we get also the challenge of who remains on the ground. And that, again, gives us a new way of looking at, of the thinking around sustainability. And we've always tried to work towards enabling that we have organizations that you started working with. So when I hear people say Safaricom Foundation gives to big organizations, then they also need to know these big organizations, do they have a model of working with the small or even organizations that are not recognized? We work with social movements. Social movements don't need to be registered. They're solving a problem at that time. Engage with them, solve the problem, move to the next issue. So get to learn about these organizations that you may want to call big today. They are not big in terms of the model because they come down to the community. They will work with the communities, help them to register self-help, CBOs, which move into NGOs that are national NGOs. We've worked in Mombasa, for instance, we've worked with Sauti ya Wanawake. Anyone going to Mombasa today looking for an organization will tell you, I met Sauti ya Wanawake. But they started under a tree reduction because they are also pushing for policies that are national out of the modeling work that they do in the coast. So understand the organization and equally appreciate that the government has a role to ensure that policies, relevant policies are in place for the enabling.
Thank you so much, Susan. I want to pause here as we wind down. Come back to Judy. If there is any question, any concerns burning from online, possibly Mesha, any of you, so that we give opportunity now for our closing remarks as we do that.
Thank you, Mike. I have a comment here from Wanjiru Kahinya, and I think Susan has just alluded to this. How do we continue to shift power to communities? As Grace mentioned, most relationships are based on imbalanced power dynamics. How then do we position communities at the forefront of community change with partners supporting these efforts? Maybe Grace would want to comment on this.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad that that has been picked up. There is actually a global movement around shifting the power. And the work that the movement is working on is how do we not only recognize the resources that are there at the community level and recognizing that the partnership has to be equal. So there are certain principles that we work around that have also been mentioned in this panel. Key amongst them, participatory grant making. What that simply means is how do we co-design this program or intervention together? That is how you shift the power. How can we ensure that the relationships are balanced? So actually reworking some of the development partnerships that we have had traditionally in this country. How can it not be a donor and a beneficiary relationship, but it's seen as a partnership? That is simply what Shift the Power is about, bringing more equity into the partnerships, ensuring that it is community-centric, and that we have. That has come out clearly here. We always talk about it in the office. Sitting in Nairobi, as even Henry has talked about, you have a perception about how a project should be run. For instance, in Chepalungu, you have your biases about what systems can work, and you will even say that project can't work. We have to be able to be conscious of our biases, conscious of the power that we have. So I'd invite people to go to the Shift the Power movement. There's a website. One of my colleagues will put the link in the chat box. Just read and understand and join the movement. Like a movement, people come in, people identify with what the principles are, and we amplify the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is to Terry from Morris Omondi. How best can CSOs tap into private resources without having to lose their core identity to the big corporates, who often tend to have more power in deciding the costs they support?
Right. Thanks for that question. I think it very much relates to something I had mentioned around some CSOs feeling like the value has been drained after several months of partnership. And we observed that that happened when you partnered, or CSOs partnered with very large corporates. So in a way, they were overshadowed, and their objectives were sort of put in the back burner. So the best way to deal with that is, as I mentioned earlier, is to be very clear why you're going into the partnership from the very beginning, and actually ask yourself, do you need the big corporates? What stage are you in as a CSO? And do you need the big corporates? And what are the values of the corporates? As has been mentioned by Henry, their values allow them to work with smaller CSOs, grassroots organizations, and so their systems or they are out to make profit and move out. So it's important to really think through the partnership before you engage and see if it adds value to you. Different problem statements, and identifying from that array of problems, what is it that you want to bring in a private sector player on? It could be a very small aspect of your work. So take, for example, work on women empowerment. I mean, it's broad. But what are the barriers or the reasons that women, are not able to participate fully? Or girls. It could be an aspect of menstrual health hygiene, and you'll find many corporates are willing to partner in that area. Or it could be a case of women being disempowered because of livelihood issues. You could partner with a corporate that will bring in, what they're doing now, more of social entrepreneurship, and then you target the women, and when their livelihoods are better, then they are more empowered. So being very keen as we interrogate the needs of the community and your objectives, what specific areas do you want to engage the private sector players? Without that clarity, then over time you start feeling like you're being swallowed in by the big corporate player in the partnership. Yeah.
One more question before we close on that.
Last.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Just a minute. From Nazia Hussein, why is it that some major corporates tend to prefer to help NGOs in terms of in-kind donations? How can we break out of that and instead receive cash donations for sustainability reasons?
Okay. Well, I think what's important, and thanks Nadia for the question. What's important for any non-profit to recognize that it is very healthy to diversify your income. When I come to give as a corporate, I give based on my ability and what Henry said, by the policies that exist. So we could be in a position to give in kind. When you're looking at your funding strategy and your funding mix, try as much as possible to diversify so that you're bringing in those who can give you in kind and also reaching out to those who can give you funding. It's very difficult to say that I will not take bundles. Let me assume that Safaricom, the corporate, not the foundation, because they won't give you a bundle, they'll partner with you. Says we want to support maybe a bulk SMS process in this manner as a corporate. You cannot start telling them, okay, go sell those bulk SMSs and bring us money. That's not their policy. That's not their approach. Simply, when you know, and this, I am taking it that you've done research and you know that Safaricom will give you bundles or Airtel, whoever will give you bundles. Therefore, as you've done your research, be very strategic on who else do you go to and say, I have engaged Safaricom. They are ready to give me bundles. But to utilize the bundles, I need facilitators who will be moderating, who will be chatting, who will be sharing information. And they need to be given transport allowance. I need to maybe rent equipment, you know. For that purpose, then, somebody comes in and says, you have done step 1, get to step 2. So do your research. If they're giving in kind, you still have an opportunity to give, to reach out, using what you're receiving to raise more. But it's expected that you've understood the organization's policy. Yeah, Henry.
Yeah.
Yes, Henry, a quick one.
In fact, in addition, because it's about corporates, it is the issue, broaden it from fundraising to resource mobilization. I think it makes it easier because when you come to corporates, you have come to look for resources. Funding is one of them. You may be looking for skills. For example, at Safaricom, we have a very elaborate employee engagement program that if you are struggling with grant management, financial management, we have an opportunity to have one of Safaricom employees come to your organization, help you establish financial management systems free of charge. Because you came to look for resources, not money. You may want to establish a computer laboratory for a school. Do you want us to give you the money? We may have computers at Safaricom. We may even reach out to another partner who manufactures computers and then directly donate to your school. So flexibility in partnership is very, very important. Let's not go to a partner with a fixed mind that I must get the dollar, I must get the money. Ultimately, what I want is to achieve my vision, my purpose, and there are so many ways of getting to that end. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want us to close this down by quick parting shots, closing remarks. For me, this discussion has just started. I want to give each one of you an opportunity to give us closing remarks. I want to begin with Terry, and I will end with Susan because I want to invite Susan to say something else beyond the closing remarks.
Okay, right. And thank you, Mike, for taking us through this session so well. And to everyone else who's been listening, I hope we can take this conversation further. As has been said, this is just the beginning. And I think we are yet to see bigger things happening. There was a lot of talk a few years ago on what they call private government partnerships. They call them PPPs. Yes. And private public partnerships. Yes, private public partnerships. Yes. It was a big deal, and everyone was talking about it. Yes. So hopefully, in the next few years, we can drive this conversation and make. I don't know what acronym we'll give to ours. PPT sounded very nice. Private sector NGO is quite a mouthful, but I hope we can make this legitimate, and make it a solution that people go to. And to talk even to our development partners, I must say that I really like what Business Finland have done. They now are recognizing the need for this kind of partnerships and are actually funding directly consortiums of NGOs and businesses. They have a specific funding for that. And just a word out there to development partners as well, to start recognizing this as viable vehicles for investment or for funding, and look out for consortiums between private sector players and NGOs. And my final parting shot is let's make this work. Let's have policies and structures and frameworks in place where CSOs and private sector can partner effectively.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Grace?
Yes, let me join Terry in saying thank you very much to our moderators for a great session, and again to ActionAid for this platform, and especially to those who have, been listening for the last couple of hours. My parting shot picks up from where Terry has left off. There are countries whereby partnerships between the not-for-profit sector and the corporates have actually been streamlined and legislated upon. There's an opportunity for us to learn from India, whereby corporates that earn a particular percentage of profits are mandated to actually then support not-for-profit organizations and the communities at large. What I have benefited from learning from India is that there wasn't resistance or feeling from the corporate side that why are we being forced into this? Because they had already developed this culture. And so what can we learn from other jurisdictions around working together for community good? Because ultimately that's why we're all here. Thank you.
Welcome, Henry.
Thank you very much. And finally, hongera to ActionAid.
Thank you.
Being 50 is not an easy thing, but it's also a blessing.
Yeah.
For the online participants, Safaricom has the Ndoto Z2 initiative that we launched a month ago. The deadline is on the 15th of this month. Please get to the Safaricom Foundation website. We have the application form. Share with us the dream of your community in health, education, economic empowerment, and we will work with you to enable your dream come true. Currently, Safaricom PLC is running a campaign, what we call Tuinuane. And for the last 2.5 hours that will be in this session, I've just seen how this campaign is also part of this conversation around Tuinuane, because it's about partnerships.
Yeah.
So the slogan, or so there's some wise words around Tuinuane. When actions are there, words are not necessary. In other words, when we do good, when we come together, when we are able to, when we enable each other, when we leverage on each other's competences to do more, to impact more, everybody will see. We will not need those voluminous reports. We will not need those TV documentaries, because the people, the world will have seen what our partnership will have achieved. Hence, words will not be necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. That is quite capturing. Back to you, Susan. Your parting shot, but also you have a message for us. Okay.
When you say message, I'm almost feeling like a prophet.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, first and foremost is to say that we are still looking forward to engaging with creating platforms for engagement, because that is what we became good at in the last 50 years. Whether we are engaging with the communities, we are engaging with development partners, we are engaging with the government, you'll always find ActionAid ready, present, and willing to create the space, because at the end of the day, it's the targeted community that benefits. So in this sense, we are talking of Kenya. ActionAid came to Kenya 50 years ago, and here we are again looking at another 50 years. So what does that mean to us as an organization? But what does it also mean to the other organizations that we have worked with, we have partnered with? First and foremost is to start with the model that we started with, the child sponsorship model, where we sponsored individuals. And to date, we get to meet some of them. You get to meet them in various positions, very high-level, big offices. And when you say you're from ActionAid, someone says, I am who I am because of ActionAid. And that is the commitment that we brought into our work and said, can we move from an individual and let a community come one day and say, I am who I am because of ActionAid. Yep. And again, we are now looking at Kenya as a whole. We will be very, very glad to see that when we sit down, as we are reflecting through these 50 years that we've been in Kenya, it can go down on record that Kenya is where it is because of ActionAid. And I can tell you that is the case. We were very instrumental when we were looking at the Constitution of Kenya reforms, very, very instrumental as a country. And we were looking at where the gains would be. We were so keen on devolved government, which has just brought all this massive change in the counties. We were also keen on looking and seeing that through the affirmative action, but not only affirmative action, environment is created where we have women at the decision-making tables. We are getting there as a country. We were keen as well to see that the funds, wherever they are, get to the community, get down to the people who are at the communities. And that is why we supported devolved funding. Most importantly, we were also very, very keen to see that women were free from violations. And so the pieces of legislation that address violence against women, we were at the forefront pushing for them just to ensure that we have them. Today, we are talking of young people, and we are looking at our 50 years being a 50 years that carries a future that will have a lot of young people, carries a future that will also have individuals actualizing themselves. We've looked at a lot of community actualization, but we are also saying, let's also keep moving towards individual actualization. What am I seeing as a participant or someone engaging in a partnership that ActionAid has with Safaricom Foundation, for instance? Where will I be 5 years after participating in that partnership? It brings in that individual realization, the dream that you ought to dream, and this really brings us to young people. We are looking at the years to come as years that we cannot avoid looking into climate justice globally. And as ActionAid, of course, in the Federation, we lead the delegation on accountability because we keep saying you have to be accountable. Right. ActionAid Kenya is a member of a federation of 45 other countries. And that is one thing that we push as a country program. That accountability in the morning, accountability at lunchtime, accountability in the evening. And so we are looking forward to continue working with the young people and their communities to ensure that even as we talk accountability, we are demanding of the same from government, we are demanding of the same from ourselves, but also building capacities so that we can be able to deliver that. So this forum is not an end by itself, but the beginning of the conversations. In October, we will be having the corporate dinner. We are calling it corporate dinner, but it's not to block anyone. It's just to enhance these conversations and take these conversations to another level. 6th of October, 2022, between 6 and 9. This will be a physical meeting at Sarova Pan-African Hotel. You can find details on how to register, how to participate. And our main aim is to continue talking about this partnership, because it's through such kind of partnerships and their existence that we are here today as an organization. So I wanted to check with Mike if he knows the kind of message that he wants me to give, and if I'm yet to give it, I can narrow down. Otherwise, as I said, I love sharing and I can talk till morning.
Thank you so much, Susan. We want to end it here.
Okay, I know your message.
Yes. Yes.
Let me take this opportunity
Yes.
to appreciate everyone.
Correct.
Is that the message?
Yes.
To appreciate everyone who has taken time first to connect, to register, to connect and listen in, and then contribute to improve this conversation. We really appreciate our viewers, those who've joined online, and the kind of questions that you have raised, the kind of comments that you've raised. We will take these comments. They'll actually help build up on the corporate dinner. Secondly, I want to appreciate the panelists. These are my friends, I can say, and I've gotten to know a new friend today, Terry. But Henry is my friend, as he said, 12 years of every day. I stand at the window in ActionAid and look at Safaricom as I'm calling Henry. And that's the partnership you want to have, where you're not scared that Henry will not pick or Henry will not respond to your message because he's corporate and you're here maybe at the scale of begging as it used to look like. But we have built such kind of appreciation between the two organizations that ActionAid knows that when Safaricom says, we would like you to come and share, we know what they want us to share. Bringing communities on board, scaling up your programs, sustainability, and we are very, very grateful for that kind of partnership that Safaricom Foundation and M-Pesa Foundation has accorded ActionAid. And I know many more partners, KCDF has partnered with Safaricom, would say the same, that there is a uniqueness. And this probably is an opportunity that other corporates may want to reach out to Safaricom, reach out to ActionAid, get to know how did we manage this partnership to a level that today ActionAid would independently say, this is what we've achieved, and Safaricom would say, this is what we've become, but we reflect back and see a partnership of over 12 years. I want to thank my friend, Grace. Grace is my friend. At some point, she was my mentor, much as she's calling herself today that KCDF is a child of ActionAid because they are 25 years. Grace was a mentor. And it's interesting to note that organizations need to speak with each other. KCDF is an NGO, it's a national NGO. ActionAid is a national NGO with affiliation in the ActionAid Federation. But that does not stop us from having mutual conversation. So it's again to say thank you so much for taking time to come here. Thank you for helping us to demonstrate the mutuality that ought to exist. Because I know once Kenyans are educated on philanthropy, once Kenyan corporates are educated on giving, they'll want to give to a joint collaboration that is demonstrable. And being here has made that happen. Terry, thank you so much. Your presence has helped us see the importance of evidence. It would have been a story without the research being shared. And converting this conversation into an evidence-based conversation is worth appreciating. Thank you so much. That research, and also for Fingo to be just open to say, we are not keeping the information to ourselves to use it, to benefit us, but the information is out there, and I know there are processes probably of ensuring that the local communities can tap into this information because of the availability of technology. And so thank you for sharing, thank you for holding us accountable and asking us tough questions or making such comments that ideally have sent us back to the drawing board. Gratitude goes to the moderators. We would not have spoken to ourselves. This we can do it in having coffee. Right. Yeah, but sitting here and having you moderate this session has brought a lot of value. East Africa Philanthropy Network cannot go unnoticed. You helped us to design, you helped us to think through, you brought in a lot of flesh and a lot of energy in the end to bring people together and let's address the common problems or find common solutions. We have the technical team that is supporting us here. I'll also say thank you so much. But most importantly, my colleagues, the ActionAid who are celebrating 50 years and we are quite happy about it. We want everyone to be part of this. We are looking forward to a national event in November, and just praying that once we settle on the dates, everyone, ideally the entire country, should be able to celebrate with us. So thank you so much to everyone. I believe I haven't left anyone out, and if I have, it's not intentional. I appreciate you in my heart, and just to say thank you, and looking forward to the next level of engagement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Asanteni sana. I want to thank everyone too who has joined us online, and we want to welcome you to continue these discussions or in our social media. We are online on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and the other areas. This discussion is one that we need to take forward. We need to continue looking at the opportunities to be of value and great value in the communities where we work, continue to build effective partnerships. Tunawashukuru nyinyi wote, na we are looking forward to another opportunity to engage. Asanteni sana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to welcome all of you. My name is Michael Maera, and I work with the East Africa Philanthropy Network. Together with my colleague Judith, we are going to be your moderators today, and we want to begin by inviting Madam Susan, who will give us the introductory remarks to this webinar. Karibu, Madam.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're watching us from Kenya. Just to start off by letting you know that ActionAid is turning 50